You're listening to The Last Easy Mile, a show for men who know there's more waiting but aren't sure where to begin. I'm Josh Farahi. Whether it's carving out space for adventure, being a more present and intentional father, reconnecting with your physical edge, or rediscovering a forgotten skill, this podcast is about moving from stuck to in motion. Each episode explores that in-between moment, right before the leap, when the excuses run out and something real needs to begin. We cover fatherhood, work, faith, creativity, and what it means to keep showing up, especially when no one's coming to rescue you. Welcome to The Last Easy Mile. Let's walk it together. Evan, I want to thank you for taking the time. Time is our biggest commodity, buddy, and sharing it with me. It means a lot. And I don't know how much you know about the podcast here, but you know what I'm trying to accomplish here is just guys looking for adventure, rebirth, kind of guys like me in their 30s or 40s, 50s, kind of, missing something and want to get into adventure, learn about new stuff. I'm trying to build a community, and I'm here in Southern California, and I was born in Reno, Nevada, more of a country kid.
Head there in just a couple weeks.
Are you really? In Reno?
Yeah.
What are you doing up there?
They're teaching a class in Reno at Reno Guns.
Oh, no way. I was born there, baby. That's my home.
That's cool.
I love it there. But the reason that I invited you is because I wanted to do a ham radio kind of, and that's kind of a broad term for probably a lot of what you do, but
yeah.
You'll be the first guest I have that I actually know nothing about the topic that I'm talking about.
Okay.
So I haven't been an expert on all my guests, but I have had, I lived some of that. I've hunted, I've fished, I've camped, I've done all that stuff we've talked about, but this is like a blind spot. So, Evan, tell me a little about yourself, what you do, and what your corner of the world looks like.
Okay. Yeah, I'm born and raised here in North Carolina. I grew up in a little town called Huntersville that used to be small. It's exploded. It's near Charlotte, and it's a suburb of Charlotte. It's gotten real big, and I've slowly crept further and further away from there, trying to get back to what I grew up in. But we're here in Stony Point, North Carolina, just a little sleepy town. We're probably the biggest thing happening out here between us and the knife store that we share a building with. We keep the post office in business around here. Just they hate to see us coming with our truckload of packages every day, but we like being out here. I'm a husband, father of 3, got 3 kids under 7, and I've like I said, grew up around here. I've always worked in technology, so we kind of have a running joke in this part of the world. Everybody has to do their time, kind of like prison, but at a bank. So if you're in technology, this is a banking town. I worked at Wachovia and then Wells Fargo for several years in what they called the innovation lab, but innovation and banks don't really go together.
Right.
We tried, and I had a good time, but that's kind of where I cut my teeth on problem solving and working with people and pioneering new ideas in an environment where there's a lot of resistance. And I didn't know what that was going to prepare me for. But I left there and went into a software startup that another coworker had left to go join. And I worked there for 7 years and fell on hard times in that company. We lost a big contract, and I had started this initiative kind of as a side hustle, and I decided to make a kind of a leap of faith into entrepreneurship full time. I'd always done something as a side hustle. I've had all kinds of stuff since I was in high school, but it's the first time I'd ever been fully self-employed. And of course, married with 3 kids is not an ideal. A lot of people would say it's not ideal. It really made a man out of me, I'd say. But
Right.
I founded the company a little bit early and then jumped right into it head first with that. So
yeah, entrepreneurship is uncomfortable by its very nature, brother.
Yep,
So
it is.
I'm an entrepreneur too, and when you have those kiddos looking at you, and then you go to bed at night with so much uncertainty.
Yep.
It's like, God, I don't know what am I doing sometimes? So you got to fight that. So kudos to you, man. It's a hard leap to make for most, and most don't do it.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I have an interesting trajectory. I went on that I gained a lot of traction really quickly due to some friendships I had and just being at the right place, the right time, talking to the right people. And I was able to kind of catapult the business to support me and 3 or 4 other families now. So I employ a
Oh, right
couple of
on.
people to help keep the show on the road when I'm traveling and teaching. So I'll tell you about the business and stuff, but that's kind of me. I've lived a pretty bizarre. I've lived a few lives in my life. You know, I've done. I worked in the mission field for 10 years in Nicaragua, so I got a lot of
Huh.
experience just being in a different environment where it was uncomfortable physically and emotionally and spiritually and everything, you know, just discomfort. Um, and
When you say mission, sorry to interrupt you, Evan.
No,
When you
it's
say
okay.
mission, can you kind of tell us what that means? Like,
Yeah. So for me, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church in Huntersville, and we took one mission trip out there.
okay,
Um, and I got hooked. I fell in love with the adventure and the wildness of it and the
yeah,
scariness of it, and I never done anything dangerous. I was always a real follow the rules kind of kid, and I was like, "Man, this is awesome." And so I kept going back, and then I finally moved out there for a little while to the same community where a lot of expats were living and doing. They were basically just planting little churches in these remote villages, and we were
hmm,
actually teaching pastors. That was the main purpose of it. So we just helped them understand some fundamental things and kind of teach them and let them lead their own communities instead of us leading it. And so
right.
I loved that. You know, just I met my wife there. She's actually from North Carolina too, but that's where we met. And
You
just
been in Nicaragua?
yep, we did. Yep,
Oh, that's amazing. I
yep.
I had a guest on a few weeks ago, Nick Melillo
Okay,
with Foundation Cigars. He
okay.
moved to Nicaragua for
Yeah, they're
13
huge for
years.
cigars.
Yeah, so he started a huge cigar business and he's enjoyed some
Okay.
success. I mean, Nicaragua's a big country, but did you ever cross paths with Nick or have you heard the name?
No, that I never really got to be a part of the cigar or the coffee industry down there. Where we were was all sugarcane, the
Got
poorest
it.
part of Nicaragua. Yeah, it's a crazy place to have been in that at that time in my life. I just had never done anything, you know, I'd never been anywhere. We went to Myrtle Beach for vacation in the summer and visited family in Nashville. That's about as adventurous as I had gotten. So
Right.
kind of caught the bug with that and did a lot of motorcycle traveling when I was 21. I did a 10,000-mile motorcycle trip. I'd never been west of Nashville.
No
I just
shit.
went around the country just couch surfing with people I had met in Nicaragua and um
10,000 miles?
yep,
Wow.
yep. So I kind of have always had a craving for, you know, leaving behind the idea of comfort and of predictability, and I've always been trying to break the mold. So
Sounds like it.
this latest season has been no different. But yeah, that's kind of part of my journey. I spent the last 7 years part time as a Christian counselor, so I kind of I have a story as well and kind of heartbreak and failure and difficulty in life that landed me needing counseling, and I ended up falling in love with that as something that I wanted to give back and volunteer in that capacity. So I do a lot of, or I have historically done a lot of marriage counseling and men's counseling with guys that they're in the same boat that I was in, and just trying to help them through some of the hardest times of their life when their lives are falling apart. And so it's funny how
Right.
all these little things I've done, you know, that and the technology and the adventure and all that have kind of culminated into bringing me to where I'm at. So I'm very fortunate to have had those opportunities for sure. But a lot of
Yeah.
different experiences.
Yeah. Right on. That sounds like a really, really complex but yet beautiful background.
Yeah, thanks.
That's pretty cool. I mean, look, if you're going to start a business and be successful, I think people who have that kind of past At least
Sure.
it's in my anecdotal opinion. People who's gotten punched in the face a few times and gotten back up make the best business
That does
people.
help. That
Oh,
helps.
yeah, yeah,
And
because
being
you're gonna get yeah.
multifaceted.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps with communication, with resiliency, with, thinking outside the box, all of it.
Absolutely.
Um, so, well, tell us about your business. So, Radio Made Easy.
Sure.
What was the genesis of that outside of
Sure.
kind of
So
what you've already told us?
I went to a party at a friend of mine's who John Willis's special operations equipment. He builds nylon tactical gear. And he
Right.
throws a party a couple times a year. I was at one of his parties, and a good friend of mine was running his checkout counter for the gear at the party. And people kept bringing radios up that were not for sale. They were his personal radios that he had left in a tote out with the
Hmm.
gear. There's like a whole tote full of radios, and people kept trying to buy them. And
Huh.
my buddy was like, Evan, you need to come set up a radio booth. I know you know about radios. Like, apparently everybody wants to buy one, so you should get out here and do it next time. And I thought about it and I said, well, you know what? The thing that I've noticed about radio is everybody knows they want one. Like in our circles in the firearms training world was kind of where I was spending a lot of time those days. And this was part of that world. Everybody understands the need for communication, right? This they call it the fighting triad, right? Shoot, move, communicate. People know they know what that means. They know the need for it, but they can't make them work. So many people would bring me radios and ask me to program them already. So I thought, man, this would be perfect. Next party, I'll come out here. I'll just bring like 100 radios and I'll program them on
Hmm.
site for the
What
people.
kind of radios were they?
Just
I mean,
Baofeng
just
radios. Yeah, just the UV5R, just your typical little ham radio that you would get on Amazon, the most popular radio on earth.
got it.
So then I told it's kind of the famous thing that my buddy John repeats all the time is I told him I had this idea. I didn't know him very well at the time, and he just kind of rolled his eyes at me and said, "You won't do that." And what I didn't know is he's been told because he's an entrepreneur so many times that people are going to do something that that's his just standard response to a good
Default.
idea
Yeah.
fairy is what he calls them, right? Somebody that's got an
Right.
idea, but they're never going to do anything because 99 out of 100 times they don't do anything. But I don't think he knew who he was dealing with. So when he said that, I
Mm.
was like, all right, you wait. So I showed up to the
Yeah.
next thing. I had a booth, I had a nice table, I had all these curated products that I had kind of groomed all the things that I would want and brought it all out, and I sold out the first day, had nothing left the second day for the event we were at, and really was shocked to see, man, people really appreciate the making this easy. Like I knew it would be helpful, but I didn't quite predict how popular it would be at that event. And from there, I just kind of I had built a website and just got it going, and it slowly started building momentum. Just the radios themselves, nothing more than that, just programming radios. I don't know if you know this, but when you buy a radio from Amazon or whatever, it comes blank, right? There's nothing saved in it. So it's up to
Right.
you buy this thing. It'd be like if you buy a laptop and there's no operating system on it, right? It's a big buzzkill that you get this device that you're really excited, you want to use it. And I mean, you can punch some numbers in, but you don't really know what they mean. And you certainly
Yeah.
you can't competently use it out of the box without a pretty big investment in learning, right? I mean, and there are people that will say it's not that hard, but they're out of touch, right? They have known it for so long that it seems easy,
Right.
but for a new person, it's completely overwhelming. And so,
Well, let me ask you this, Evan. Sorry to interrupt you. Look, this is a huge blind spot for me.
sure.
What's the difference? I know there's a difference between like just a regular radio or a walkie-talkie or even a fancy walkie-talkie, if you will,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
hand. Yeah, so
Sure.
like let's start there and then build on that, and
Absolutely.
then
Sure.
we could talk about why it's important that we have this in our home.
Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
intentionally named the company Radio Made Easy, just generic radio. I leave the word
Hmm.
ham out of it. And I don't proselytize or evangelize about ham radio, right? Because for
Right.
me, radio, just the idea of I have a thing that I mash a button and talk into and it makes noise on another end, right? That technology fundamentally is what I'm all about, right? And there's all kinds of different ways to do that at different distances, different technologies. But at
Hmm.
its core, radio is the only off grid communication system, right? It's the only thing that can make your voice go further than it naturally can go without infrastructure. I mean, it's incredible what it does. It's why I always encourage people to give radios to their kids, like even just walkie
Hmm.
talkies, because they kids understand how miraculous it is. They appreciate the beauty that this thing can do these incredible things, and they'll take it everywhere and they'll own it. Like they'll really
Right.
own this device because they appreciate that miracle. But what I'm all about is introducing people to the everyday application of that technology. Like why is it useful not just for the end of the world when the zombies are roaming the earth, or not just when I'm running CQB courses with my buddies or whatever, right? There's all that cool stuff that they certainly will be useful for. But what about, like, I got to go to the grocery store with my family and I need to pick my wife up in the rain at the door so she doesn't have to walk through the rain to get to the car, right? And I need to know when to come pick her up at the door. We can use a radio. Or if I want to send my kids out in the backyard to play, but I don't want to give them a $1,200 cell phone, what can I give my kids to let the leash out a little bit for them to go play on the playground or go up ahead on the trail and still be connected to me, but not completely attached to some device, right? So all that stuff, I love showing people how you can use them on homesteads, when you're outdoor adventuring, when you're overlanding, all that stuff. And the right tool for the job is definitely a big part of the conversation. So, I mean, what you're asking is the right question, but I love to look at it just as a fundamental capability, right? Like radio itself is this technology that lets us talk through walls and talk further than our voice can travel, possibly even around the world, using
Hmm.
the electromagnetic spectrum. There's a $5 word for you today, but that it works on this thing that's all around us that we just exist in that we're not aware of, but it's incredible. So what amateur radio is, which ham is just short for amateur, that's
Hmm.
one way of interpreting that name. It's just a part of what you're allowed to use, of that spectrum. So you can get an amateur license. There's 3 levels of it. And depending on
Okay.
what license you get certain privileges in certain frequency ranges. There's stuff you can do with no license. So you probably heard of CB radio. That's an example of something that it's the same technology, right? It's a two-way radio, but that part of the spectrum is unlicensed. There's commercial licensing. There's GMRS, which is gaining a lot of popularity. It's licensed, but it's pretty easy to get that license. But I try to save the licensing discussion either for not at all or to the end. A lot of guys in the field and in the industry, they're very passionate about getting people licensed and spreading amateur radio as a hobby.
Hmm.
It's not my bag. I want people to fall in love with the capability and apply it in their life. And if they want to look at it as a hobby, that's cool. But I see it more as this is a tool that I need to use in everyday life and in emergencies. And that's a big focus. And I'm not obsessed with the licensing. It is a fact of life. But ham is really just one thing. It's one section of radio that you need a license for, so, and it's set aside for hobbyist use, to set aside for Joe Public to enjoy, which is a wonderful thing that they've set it aside for that, and they didn't sell it all off. But that's really all that means. A lot of people think of ham radio as long distance, right? They think some guy with big, huge, refrigerator sized box that's got a big knob on it and he's talking to Japan, and that
Right.
can be ham radio, but ham radio is also a walkie talkie, essentially, that It's just depending on what frequency it's using, it determines what privilege you need. But yeah, that's kind
Right.
of the bird's eye view of it. I'm more passionate about radio just in general as a technology for sure, and as a tool.
Yeah, thanks for that. I actually, um, have never put it together like that. In my mind, like ham radio is it's like a whole different thing than a walkie-talkie. I think what you're saying, obviously, is that it's just a spoke in the wheel of
It is,
radio.
yep.
It's just one thing. Um, how can these radios go such long distances? So what are they using?
You basically have two kind of worlds of radio, right? The first and most popular, most common is going to be the line of sight radio. So like
Okay.
everything from, a Paw Patrol walkie-talkie you bought at Walmart for
Right.
$5.99, that's a line of sight radio, and a Motorola that a police officer uses that costs, $7,000. At their core, they both do the same thing. They both transmit on a frequency and on a wavelength that travels, horizontally out of your radio toward the horizon. And when it hits the horizon or it hits some kind of hill or mountain or too much obstruction, it gets absorbed and it stops. And that's a fairly underwhelming capability, right? You're basically talking
Hmm.
for any handheld radio on its own, you're talking 1 to 5 miles, right? From one radio to another. Now, we have tons of ways to extend that with elevating our antenna, because if you think about it, line of sight, you can see further the higher up you are, right? Just if you think of your
Hmm.
eyes. So radios can see further and hear further when they're up higher. So that's why you see antennas mounted way up high on top of stuff, because they can
Right.
see
Right.
further. But primarily people are going to use repeater systems with those line of sight radios, which is a big part of amateur radio, is repeaters.
Okay.
Every police department, fire department, municipality, they're all going to own a bunch of repeaters that extend. They basically create a network so that those less capable radios can join up to those repeaters and have much better coverage, right? So with a repeater, you can talk 30 plus miles with that same $20 Baofeng, that could only
Hmm.
talk 2 miles today. I can talk 30, 40, sometimes even 100 miles out where you are, where repeaters are up 15,000 feet on a mountain. You can get incredible range out of that. But I always like to point out that that is infrastructure, right? So the very thing we want to get away from with radio is I don't want to depend on other people's stuff.
Right.
Well, now I've got
Right.
this repeater up on a mountain, and if it goes down, I can't talk that far anymore. Right. So you've kind of
Right.
just put all your eggs in this new basket.
Right. So Evan, real quick. So when you have a repeater that's been put up by public, municipalities or cities or whatever,
Yep.
we can use them as civilians too.
No, so usually the ones I mean by those would be for the fire department or for the police
Okay.
department, right? So they're going to have their own frequencies that they have reserved, and it's only for them. The ones that we can use will either be for amateurs, so you'll need that ham radio license to use those with permission,
I
or
see.
a GMRS repeater, which is another type of license. But yeah, usually it's just people out of the goodness of their heart, with which God bless them, right? To take their money, invest it in this machine, put it up on top of a mountain, get it solar power or gas backup or goodness, whatever they've invested to get all that going. Usually just an individual or a club of
Hmm.
individuals, no government funding, no business attached to it, just for hobby, volunteer type use. And they're all over the place. There are thousands of them all around us that almost nobody is using, because the hobby's not really thriving. It's a lot of older
Right.
folks that are kind of dying off, but when you
Sure.
when you use those repeaters, typically that's why they're there. That's who put them there.
That's interesting.
So you have
Yeah.
that universe, that's the line of sight universe. So you've either got basically walkie-talkies 1 to 5 miles or repeaters with those same types of radios. That's line of sight. Now, there's a point of diminishing, or there's a point of kind of there's an end to that capability probably at about 100 miles, right? You almost never see terrestrial, like Earth-based
Mhm.
two-way radios that can talk further than that. Even with the best repeaters on Earth, you're pretty much limited to that. So if I want to talk from North Carolina to California, there's no way, right? I would need hundreds of them connected together, which is theoretically possible, right? But economically, just not going to happen.
Right.
So,
Right.
thankfully, there's this entire separate universe in radio called skywave propagation instead of line of sight. We have skywave, and if you think about that word, it's
Skyway.
it's a wave hitting the sky. Instead of me trying to hit you here on Earth, I actually bounce my signal off the atmosphere. And that is
Wow.
really the most miraculous of all this stuff, is just to be able to take a few watts of power, aim it up at the sky, and bounce it across the earth, places that there is no way I could ever talk to any other way. We can talk infinitely around the earth with enough power. And that would be what in the amateur world is HF radio. That's what they call it. But really, it's skywave is the technology. So the military uses it. They used to depend on it a whole lot more before SATCOM was really popular and available. But if you think about it, you're very often more than 10, 20 miles from who you need to talk to in the military. So that would be how
Sure.
you would get information back and forth from units out in the field and back to the United States. And, if it wasn't done over the wire, that was how it was done. So HF is kind of the king of long distance beyond the horizon communication. And those are different radios altogether. They have completely different technology than the walkie-talkies. They use AM, so it's not an FM radio, it's an AM radio, and they use really low frequencies instead of high frequencies, and those low frequencies happen to bounce off the atmosphere instead of going through it. So, you think about something like
Interesting.
Starlink needs to penetrate the atmosphere, right? Because the satellites it's talking to are on the other side of all that. So,
Right.
um, you don't want to use low frequency. You need high frequency to penetrate. But if you
Mhm.
want it to bounce, you can exploit that bounce to do cool stuff with lower frequencies. And you could spend a lifetime studying it because it's affected by the time of day and the time in the solar cycle, all kinds of mathematics that you have to know to be able to predict how things are going to perform. And one of the most interesting things are the antennas because it's so low frequency, you need really long antennas. So, to talk to California, which I've done on a radio sitting right here on my shelf. I've talked to California all the time. It's a 65-foot long wire hanging off the back of my shop. Just
Huh.
like looks like a clothesline. Um,
I
and
see.
that's what I'm able to talk. Um, you know, not around the world, but thousands of miles for sure. And the more vertical I get it, the further it talks. The more
I see.
horizontal I get it, the closer in it talks. So you adjust the angle to get, different
More
types of,
distance.
yep. So it's a
Is it
real,
a function of how much power you're pumping into these waves as to how much bounce you're gonna get in the atmosphere?
so the power kind of, it helps with making sure it makes the trip, especially in like adverse conditions. Make sure your signal is stronger, but really your antenna and the efficiency of its ability to get it where you want it to go, where it's aiming, and how it directs the signal. If you think of like the light coming out of a light source, a
Mhm.
walkie-talkie is basically like holding a light bulb in midair. it just emits light 360 degrees in
Right.
all directions. It's very wasteful, right? It's not directed in any way. And then as we manipulate that same amount of light, you could have a spotlight. It's not any more light, it's just focused energy, right?
Sure.
Radio, you have all that same sort of stuff. And light behaves pretty similar to radio waves, right? It's a good way to think of them, except light can't go through stuff, radio can.
Hmm.
Um, but ultimately, the thing radio can't go through is Earth. So, once it hits the
Right.
horizon or once it hits a hill or a mountain, it's dead. But we can bounce over it, right? So think of having a mirror on the ceiling for your spotlight, and now I can bounce it. Now you'll get more bounces with more power. So, if I run 5 watts, I'm really not going to get more than that one bounce. But if I run 1,500 watts, now that might cost
Right.
me $10,000 to be able to run that much power. But if I do, I might get 3 or 4 skips, and then I can talk further in condition. You can do it on low power, but everything has to be right. It has to be like a blue moon, right? But high power, you just make your own path.
Are those bounces you're referring to the repeaters, or is
No,
that
this
bouncing
is
off
just the
natural?
the wave itself bouncing up and
If it
down off
bounces
the
around, got
atmosphere.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Cool.
that part of radio actually is less of my focus, mainly because it's so complex and it's fairly expensive to get into. You need about $1,000 to get into HF radio. Um, you can get into line of sight radio for $50,
Hmm.
and use it every day, carry it in your pocket. You're not carrying a 65-foot long antenna in your pocket. So it's
You
a
know.
little less versatile, but if you want true off-grid long distance communication with no dependence on anybody, there's no replacement for HF radio. I mean, it is the king. It's pretty cool.
Right. So, what would you recommend for somebody who? So, let's just use me as an example.
Yeah.
I live in a city. I want to have this capability. I want to be able to give my kids, radios to walk around when we go
Yeah.
camping or fishing.
Absolutely.
I also want one of maybe in my car. I have a Jeep that I go
Yep.
overlanding with,
Okay.
all the
Cool.
time. What's the setup for like that family? What would you recommend?
So I hear this all the time, right? Where do I start? The first place I start is a handheld radio for each member of the family, right? That would be kind of my baseline. I think of it in the gun world, it's like a concealed carry pistol, right? Like it's not the best thing, but everybody needs one all the time, and that's just what we're gonna
Hmm.
start with. And it's like that in a lot of ways, in that it's not the best tool, but it's a bare minimum, right? So with a handheld radio, in my point of view, it would be something that we call unlocked or wideband. So I don't ever recommend people buy a GMRS specific radio or a ham specific radio or a MERS. These are all different types of radios, right? What I like and what I recommend and what we sell are radios that can do everything, right? So I want the Swiss Army knife. The radios
Right.
we sell can do the job of 7 or more locked down individual use case radios. So, for instance, that Mickey Mouse walkie talkie at Walmart, or a Midland GMRS overlanding radio, or a
Hmm.
marine boat radio, or a ham radio, or a commercial radio, all these different types of radios, we can do all that in one radio. And that's what I generally recommend. And for a family, I think you can't go wrong with something that is durable and waterproof, right? That's pretty important with my kids. I've
Sure.
given them the cheaper radios. They usually end up doing okay, but something is going to break eventually. The good news is
Eventually,
it's
yeah.
cheap enough to swap it out. But with another thing I like to do is program the radios in a way that I can be sure that my kids only hear me. So I don't
Mm.
necessarily
Yeah.
need encryption or privacy per se, but I don't want some random other dude talking to my kid at a national park because he has a radio with channel 3 and so do they, and he pretends to
Right.
be me. Or So I program
100%.
them in such a
Yeah.
way that they only hear me and I only hear them. Doesn't give us
Mhm.
privacy. Everybody else can hear us, but we only hear each other. And that uses something called tones to accomplish that every analog radio can do. There's some steps you can take to do that sort of thing, and something we help people learn. But I like to start there. The cool thing with a handheld radio is you can press it into all kinds of roles. So like you talked about, if you wanted to run it in your Jeep, all our radios have USB-C charging. So you get a mount, you plug in your USB-C cable. Now it's a Jeep powered radio. And
Mhm.
then you stick a mag mount antenna, or maybe you hard mount an antenna somewhere on the Jeep and plug it into the antenna jack. And now you have a mobile radio. You can use a speaker microphone to talk to it remotely, so you don't have to move the radio itself. Some of our radios have wireless speaker mics, so you don't even need the cables. But basically, you can press it into that roll and then take it back out and put it in a backpack or put it on your belt clip, right? So I like handhelds for that. They're not the best for that job because they're pretty low power,
Right.
but they
Right.
can be made to work there, and they're pretty versatile. So that's where I start.
Mhm. That's pretty cool. So explain to me the difference though between like GMRC and CMRS
Yeah.
and ham. Like what when you say they're locked, what do each of those represent?
So if you buy a GMRS radio, it'll be called a GMRS radio. Um, it'll have 22 channels.
Okay.
That's it. You can't do anything else with it. You're confined to those 22 channels. Now you're expected to get a GMRS license to use GMRS frequencies. That's expected. That's how you get the privilege. Now, does anyone care that you have that license? I would say 99.9% of the time, no. Um, but technically, you need one. But the problem is that radio can't do anything else. And I may be stranded on the ocean or at a lake or on a river and I need some help. And it'd sure be nice to be able to get on Marine Channel 16 and ask the Coast Guard to come rescue me. And there is
Sure.
no technical reason my radio shouldn't be able to do that. But a
Right.
GMRS radio cannot, because it's like we just built a nice safe playground that nobody can stray from, that has really good fence around it. And we can
Right.
trust that the kids can't get into trouble, and that's fine. But what I do is I make sure that's programmed in appropriately. So if someone intends to be using GMRS, they're programmed, they're labeled, they can stay there. But if they ever need to do something else, like use a ham radio repeater in an emergency to get help from further away, even if they don't have the license, if it's an emergency, the rules actually permit you to use it anyway. And
Hmm.
I want the tools that I'm carrying to do everything. I don't want to handicap myself. So, I
Right.
really get frustrated when I meet students who have invested hundreds of dollars into radios that are handicapped, when you could have spent.
Why do they even make those if they it like I mean, what's the purpose of making something boxed in?
So there's a couple purposes. Philosophically, it's to keep you out of trouble, right? Philosophically, it's you can't mess up. You can't accidentally be on the local fire department's channel because it can't work over there.
Got it.
Um,
Yeah.
legally, or kind of regulationally, I guess it's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
point is that it is sold and it is regulated as a GMRS radio. So that's how they're able to sell it, is that it can only do
Got it.
that.
Yeah. That
And
makes sense.
then there's also, to some extent, there's kind of the the limitation is a feature in some ways, because a lot of people don't want to be overwhelmed with having to program that radio or having to make sure they're not getting in trouble. So its simplicity can be a feature. It's just, I philosophically I don't love that. But that's why. So there are
No, that
radios
makes sense.
that
Yeah.
do it all, but
Yeah.
you have to set them up. So if you don't set them up right, then you can get into trouble by being somewhere you shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. For regulatorily speaking, especially because Uh, People want to be in a playground, like you said, that's fenced in.
Yep.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So as part of with our service, every radio we sell is programmed, so you don't have to be as worried. Am I in the wrong place, right? And
Hmm.
if you just get a blank radio, and a lot of airsoft guys, I've seen pictures on Instagram of their radio, and it's on a public service frequency, like it, because all they did is they took out of the box, they punch in a number, and they start talking, and that number might be the local fire department frequency, and they don't even know it.
Oh,
So
wow.
so
Yeah.
that's a big problem that can happen. I wouldn't say it's a big problem as far as like it happens a lot, but it's a potential problem. And when it is happening, that's bad because you might be impacting your local emergencies. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why they do that. And that's why we pre program to prevent people from unintentionally stepping in a mess.
Right. Makes sense. And then, so that's the concealed carry basic,
Yeah, yeah.
toolbox. What would be the next kind of level up from there?
So I teach all the time that for a radio to be useful, you need four things, right? You need to have it, which seems obvious, but you'd be surprised at how often you need it and don't have it. You need it to be
Right.
on, which includes it being charged, right? You need it to be on the right channel, and you need the volume up, right? Well, when it's a handheld radio, all of that is at risk, right? I don't have it with me.
Right.
It's dead. It's off, and it's not. If it's on a different channel, and if it is on the right channel, I might have the volume down because it's annoying me, right? So
Right.
to combat that, I personally make it a high priority to have a base station radio where I live that's always on a certain channel. It's plugged into a power source that can't get turned off, and it's always on the same channel, and the volume's always up. So I know that radio will make noise if someone needs my attention, right? And that's very different than, yeah, I have a radio. It's in my backpack out in the garage, and I turn it on when I go kayaking. That's
Right. Right.
and when we're thinking of radio as a lifestyle choice, right, as of something we're going to implement all the time for improving our life, we need it to be accessible to us. So a base radio is one of those things. So it could be that same handheld radio, but the difference is I don't mess with it. It's it's
Hmm.
on a permanently installed kind of either a shelf or a clip to the wall or whatever. Now you could implement a higher power radio in that scenario, which is usually what people do. They put a base station in. That's one of them, and then the other one that I advocate the even more is a vehicle based radio that turns on when you turn the car on. So
Right.
it's a keyed ignition source. The reason for that is under stress. You don't have to remember to turn the radio on, and when you need it the most, you're stressed out. So, when my wife
Yeah.
gets in her van, the radio turns on when the van turns on. There's not a decision making process, and it's on the right channel, and the volume's always up. So I know if I see that van, I can talk to who is in it. If I can see it, I can talk to it, and so those are kind of the AR-15. We're moving up
Hmm.
into this thing packs a punch. If you add a mobile radio, it has 50 watts instead of 5 watts, which I'll go ahead and warn you does not mean it talks 10 times as far, but it does punch a little harder. So if you've got obstructions other than earth, it can punch harder. Um, and those are going to have better interfaces, more ergonomic for in a vehicle. Like if you're in your Jeep, you don't want to be dealing with this tiny postage stamp size screen trying to
Right.
figure out, you want a
Right.
nice big screen with big knobs and big buttons. That's really what's built for a vehicle, not a handheld. So, you get all those advantages, but those are kind of the next the next frontier.
Level up.
Yep.
Yeah. What channel do you have your radio set to? Well, you said you have it set on one channel. Is there a specific channel? Is it like
Yeah,
fit based for your family?
for my
Uh,
family, I actually have commercial frequencies for the business that I've purchased. And so we use those with encryption. So, and I've invested quite a lot in that, right? That's kind of something that's part of my life, but you'd be surprised how affordable that is. But that's what we use. And when I talk about the radio doesn't make any noise unless I'm the one keying it up, right? That's the reason for that is I want the volume to be up. And what people do with radios that make noise when they don't hear people they want to talk to is they turn them down, right? And that is kryptonite
Oh,
for a
yeah.
radio. So
Right.
having a way of programming it that ensures this thing is always on and it's always got the volume up, that is so crucial to making it actually useful. Because I meet so many people, they're like, yeah, I hear so much nonsense on this radio. I'm done with it. I turn it down. And
Mhm.
then,
Of course.
then
Yeah,
when
if you're
you
just
need
hearing
it,
people
it's
talk.
down.
Yeah. Yeah. How much
So
does it cost to buy a station? And is it where are your limits for that? Like, is it national, international?
So
Who owns the
it
station?
depends, but basically a ballpark is $500 for 10 years, gets you what they call a business itinerant license, and
Okay.
you apply for it in whatever states you can justify your use in. So for me, I have all 50 states because I teach around the country. But for a family, you might get your state and three neighboring states or whatever you could justify in your application that you would reasonably need. And they'll give you 4 or 5 frequencies that are yours. They're shared in a business pool, but they're not as shared as like Channel 3 on a walkie-talkie, right? That's shared with 10 million people.
Right.
These are shared
Right.
with 2 dozen people in the whole country. So you've got
Got
a
it.
pretty good option there. And now if you think about that cost, I mean, a lot of people might be sticker shocked at the $500, but think about it's for 10 years. So now we're down to
Right.
$50 a year. You got 10 buddies, we're down to $5 a person per year to
Yeah.
have our own
That's right.
private frequencies. Nobody has to pass any tests. Nobody has to, the guys working security at the local football game, they didn't pass any tests to be able to use their radio. That company bought frequencies and handed them a radio, and that's accessible to all
I
of
see.
us.
Yeah. So you don't need to have a license to have a commercial line then.
That is the license. Yep. You get a commercial license. Yep. But there's no test to pass.
There's no test. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Got it.
The test is your $500.
Just out of curiosity, is there a way to get your own dedicated line that no one else has?
There is. Yep. Those are fixed position. So, if you had a base station or you had a repeater or you had the itinerant license is meant to be flexible enough to move around the country with it or the state.
Hmm.
But yeah, you can get what they call a fixed stationary license that's all yours. The reason is, there's only so much capacity. So that frequency that's yours in California is also someone else's in Indiana, right?
Right.
There's not enough of them to just give out.
Frequencies. Yeah.
So they will do a study to make sure yours would never interfere with anybody else, and that's how you would get that. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's
Yeah.
a
Wow.
big,
Learned a lot. Yeah.
deep rabbit hole. Part of what we do
Yeah.
to try to help people navigate is I literally have my personal calendar available for the entire world to book time to talk to me about their specific use case, right? So something that I desperately wanted when I was getting into this is just somebody to talk to that had a clue that I could just take 30 minutes of their time. You know how it is if you're doing a podcast, right? It's like
Yeah.
getting to talk to a dude who knows about a thing instead of
Oh, it would
you
save me so
spending
much
months
time.
of
Yeah.
your life on YouTube and blogs and half the stuff on
Correct.
the internet is wrong and the other half is poorly explained, right? So it's like
Yeah.
I
Or
think
just stale.
that's
You
what
know.
we right. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
try to make that a part of what I do. It's a huge part of the business is just talking to average people who they have a certain problem they want to solve. We unpack it, we build the right
Sure.
solution for it, and we get them the stuff. So
That's generous of you, man. Not a lot of people are available like that. Do you do online classes? I know you say you travel the country, you're going to Reno here in a few weeks, but
yeah. I aspire to do online classes. We don't yet. I'm asked for it near daily. The challenge is radio is an in-person phenomenon, right? And our
Sure.
class is incredibly hands-on, and I'm confident we have the best beginner radio class there is. I've tried to take all of them. Um, but you need to be there. I need to see you punching the buttons, and I need you to
It's a
press.
challenge.
I
Yeah.
need you to
Yeah.
talk to me and me to talk to you. And there are things I could teach anyone on the internet, but a lot of it really does require us to be breathing the same air. And so I haven't cracked that nut yet. I really want to because I know it will scale so much better than me dragging my
Yeah.
family around.
Sure.
Going to Reno, it's a 4-day drive back home. I mean, to North Carolina. So I
Oof.
would love to avoid those sorts of things if
Yeah.
I could, but I just don't see it being. It would be a great thing to sell. I don't know that it would actually help people, and I have a hard time
Yeah.
selling people things that I don't really believe is gonna solve their problem. So that I would love to
Yeah. You
do
want to
it.
add true value. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm not convinced there's not a way to do it, but I haven't figured it out yet. So that's my honest answer.
No, and I appreciate that. That's well, look, it's online anything when you're teaching something technical
Yeah.
and handsy is difficult.
Yeah, like
Um
how are you gonna teach an online fly fishing class? Right. Like
right, exactly.
you can
Exactly.
learn a little
It's
bit, but you can get
bit,
maybe the
yeah.
the knowledge, but the practical application, it's just it's like that. It really is.
Hmm. Yeah. So look, man, I want to respect your time. We've actually been chatting. I can't believe it. 53 minutes went kind of
Wow,
flew
that's
by.
awesome.
Yeah, I learned a lot, man. This was a huge blind spot for me, and you filled some holes. Obviously, like you said, it's a huge rabbit hole
Yeah.
that you can go down. I think it's important that folks have this in their home. We didn't really touch on the emergency part of it because I think you mentioned that's you're more into the everyday use, and I appreciate that. But obviously, if something goes wrong, if we have a natural disaster, you need to communicate with friends and
Yeah,
family.
without a doubt.
With, I mean, it'll be the only way. I mean, it'll
We
be the
lived
only
that,
way.
if you remember, we just had the 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Helene here in North
Hmm.
Carolina last year. That was the perfect demonstration of exactly what you just said. There was one ham radio repeater functioning, and it was the only method of communication in and out of the disaster zone for over 2 weeks. No cell phone.
Wow.
I mean, if you had Starlink, you were good. But
Yeah.
basically it was ham radio and Starlink. And so, we lived that, and I handed out hundreds of radios to search and rescue teams and volunteers. They're going into the darkness, wondering what they're going to find, and they need a lifeline. So,
Right.
we lived that. I really sincerely believe it's an emergency preparedness tool, but in that same breath, I have to remind everyone that if you don't implement it in your daily life, you'll be clueless when the disaster comes, right? It's like if you've
Right.
never
Right.
used your cook stove and now you need your cook stove, like you're not going to
Okay.
know how to make it work. So that's a big part of my motivation of getting it as a practical thing for everyday life is okay. We used this last week, right? We have them in the car. We talk when we go down the road on road trips, or we use them at the grocery store. We use them when we go hiking. We know this stuff. Now it's a disaster. Turn it on and use it just like you did last week. Nothing changes. It's
Yeah.
muscle memory.
Well, it's just like any other tool, right? I mean, if you have a
Absolutely.
gun, you can't just buy a gun, stick it in your house, and be like, okay, we're safe.
Right.
No, you got to practice it. You do know how to use it,
Yep.
and under stress,
Yep.
when it's light, when it's dark.
Absolutely.
It's just to your point. It's a tool. Well, look, I'm gonna put all your information in the show notes, bud. Your
Awesome.
website. You have an Instagram account that I think is flourishing when you have a
Yeah,
hundred
that's our
thousand or so
primary
followers.
primary thing is
Yeah,
Instagram.
and that's how I found you.
Cool.
And you also do some YouTube videos too. Am I right about that?
Yeah,
Or
I've neglected it, but I aspire to be a YouTuber as well, but it's a different animal.
It is a well, Instagram's so easy. You record, you click a button, and
Yep.
it's gone,
Yep.
and it's out there in the world. YouTube has a few extra steps, but no, I get it. I get it. You can't run a business, be a social media expert, be a YouTube expert. It's hard.
Yep.
It's hard,
Definitely
but
not have any other life to go with it, that's for sure.
that's right. That's right. But Evan, dude, I really appreciate it. I learned a ton.
You too, man. You ask great questions.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm gonna go right now. Once we end this interview, I'm gonna go to your website myself and tinker around. And do you ever come down to California for classes, or is this too
I
far for you?
It's
Is
not too
Nevada the
far.
limit?
It's mainly that I try not to go places that want me to be in prison for the things I have on my body on regular.
I know.
But
I
we're
know.
totally
I
open to it.
know.
For everybody listening, we go where we're invited. So I stay
Okay.
very
Yeah.
busy with the places
Yeah.
that have said, "Hey, will you come teach here? We've got a spot. We've got 5 guys. We'll set you up." I stay so busy with that that I really don't need to seek out other
Oh,
places.
interesting.
But
Okay.
but I love to set up tours. So, when I'm out in Reno, I thought about adding Vegas or California, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
needed to get home for this. But usually I'll do 3 or 4 weekends out on the road at a time, and open to anywhere. I'm going to Alaska next summer.
Oh,
And
good for
so
you.
we'll be everywhere. And I would encourage anybody though, if you see something near you, don't wait for it to get right in your backyard. Pony up, make a trip. If it's 5 or 6 hours down the road, that's probably the closest I'm going to be for the next year. Make it happen
Sure.
if it's important to you. It will be worth the
And
while.
it's on your website. It's on your website where you're visiting or your
Yes, sir.
schedule.
You got the
Obviously.
training
Yeah.
section of the website has our full schedule on it, and we're always looking for hosts. So if you want to host, shoot us an
Sure.
email, and we'll get you lined up.
All right, Evan. I appreciate it so much, man.
You're welcome.
I'm amped now. I want to go buy some radios, man.
Well, let me
You
let
got
me
me
set
into
you
it.
guys up. You can be one of my ambassadors out there, showing people what
Yeah.
it's all about. I'd love to get you using them.
Yeah, let's chat offline and I'm open to that. But
Cool.
all right, thanks, my man. God bless you.
All right.
Thanks for walking the last easy mile with me. If something in today's episode moved you, good. That means there's still something alive in you worth pursuing. But don't let it end here. Send the message, try the thing, start the shift. If this episode helped, like, subscribe, and share with someone else who might be feeling stuck. You never know who needs to hear exactly this. I'm Josh Farahi. Until next time, keep walking.